Hello again. I thought I'll make a video and show you my falling block serial number 1 again, made by Martin Hagn and myself. We worked on it for years, actually. Martin passed away on November 25th, and what a loss. He was just a fantastic gunmaker. I won't bother going over his life because that's well documented on Google. A number of people have written about his life, including me. And I thought maybe it'd be more interesting to see his guns, because even though it didn't seem like it, you know, we all talk about Winchester. Well, Winchester actually was not a fantastic gun designer. He was a fantastic businessman, as you know. More accurately, Browning. And people like Browning are remembered for being great designers, and it doesn't seem like we kind of had great gun designers in our midst, but actually I would say Martin Hagn was one. He's best known for his single-shot falling block, but over the years, as we dealt on different gun designs, I could see that he actually had designs for all kinds of guns. Unfortunately, out of sync with the times, because arguably the golden age of gun design, at least gun design pertaining to falling blocks, bolt actions, and so on. Maybe that time has passed, and now a lot of attention is paid to semi-automatic guns. Anyway, I'll start with what? So when did I meet Martin? Probably, I think, I was trying to remember. It all becomes a blur. I think it was 1995. And I had all kinds of ideas. I had a decent gun collection. Falling blocks were interesting to me. They're a lot, they're interesting to a lot of gun collectors and hunters. And somehow I met him and actually flew out to meet him. I think I wrote you about that. We started talking about this idea I had for the falling block double rifle, which is here on the table. But I probably should rewind a little bit and just explain how we ended up making what I think is the best falling block. And that even includes the Browning design. I've looked at them all and I've taken them all apart, probably the way you have. But it all starts with this design. This is a Heron action. And I had one of these rifles. These are amazing rifles. I don't have one right now, or else I would show it to you, but already in 1990 or so, I had at least one Heron. I think it was made by Nagel and Mentz. Anyway, what's neat about the Heron is it kind of works backwards, the trigger guard and everything else, but we can discuss that another time. The technical issue that I wanted to bring to your attention is this firing pin. You can see it's at an angle. And ammunition being the way it was and is, sometimes primers are harder, sometimes primers are softer, and this little block was supposed to retract the firing pin, but on mine, I would fire and then the firing pin gets stuck in the primer here. Then when you go to lower the mechanism, the block, you could theoretically shear off the tip of the firing pin, and that actually happened. So that happened to me, and then probably a lot of other people, and then by total coincidence, I think Martin was over here hunting with Hartman and Weiss. These gentlemen run a great gun company. I haven't visited in years, but this is actually their catalog. And I believe that's the story. I may have it a little bit wrong. They were hunting and they had a Heron, and that's what happened. And then somebody said to Martin, that's pretty lousy, and Martin agreed that is really lousy. And they didn't want to, say, well, we better go back to the Browning design. They didn't like the hammer for some reason. So somebody said to Martin, well, it's really bad, why don't you make a better one? And Martin took that seriously and did, and came up with just a superb action. So I have one here on the table. This is the Mini. I've shown this to you before. the mini falling block. So, I mean, it's a really delicate rifle. Some people say it's like sort of a hummingbird gun. It's in .223, which I said to Martin is maybe too much for such a tiny little rifle and action, but he felt .223 was good. I actually discussed, I said, why don't you make it in 5.7 or 38 specials, you know, one of the Rook cartridges, but he liked .223, so .223 it is, and you can see. And probably the best thing I can do to honor Martin is show you the incredible workmanship. I mean, it's like owning, I was going to say it's like owning a Picasso or something like that, but a lot of Picassos may be fantastic art and worth millions, but I don't know that they look as good as these rifles. Just a remarkable design. And one thing that everybody notices with the Hagen action is that everything is controlled because of the way the springs are set up. This is difficult for me to explain, but the springs control the lever at all times. You don't have any shakiness. Also, you can see no visible pins, no visible screws. Everything is internal, which means taking these apart and putting them together, I was going to say takes a high IQ. It doesn't. If you know what's what, you can do it, and you can see how perfectly it's fitted, so you can close it like that. Martin's stock work was as good as it gets, and over time, Ralph Martini, his partner, makes probably on par stocks and rifles. Somebody will probably ask me, what was the first rifle that I purchased from Martin Hagn? It was a Mauser bolt action, and he made fantastic Mauser bolt action. In the meantime, other gun makers, you know, there are a lot of master gun makers out there, and they also turn out some beautiful Mausers. Martin's work was always perfection. He dealt with customers, and he dealt with me, and he dealt with the public. He went to all the shows. You may know him from SCI. He was a member of the American Custom Gun Makers Guild, and before he moved to Canada, I think he lived in Alaska for a while. He was a member over in Germany of all the guilds there, although I don't know them by heart. Excuse me. Anyhow, wherever he went, he turned out these beautiful rifles. So that's the mini falling block. And I beg your pardon if I cover a lot of ground and a little bit disorganized, but maybe you can see these Hartmann and Weiss Hagen falling blocks. You can see Hagen action. They sell rifles, or they used to sell rifles to royalty and all of the great Russian hunters and Austrian hunters, and there are lots of them. They bought from Hartmann and Weiss. Martin, yeah, he was very happy with this design. I was in his shop many times when he was building these interrupted threads. They may remind you of the Winchester takedown system. So you can see this rifle. Some of the lines in the Hartmann and Weiss catalog are more what you would call Germanic, and then gradually over time Martin wanted his rifles to be sort of slightly more British, and people were telling him to do that, because actually if you look at the Hagen, we still have the drawing of the Heron. If you kind of think broadly, you'll see that the Hagen looks similar, not the same, of course, but there's definitely some Heron, and Martin knew that. And then here's the action in the white, and there's the mechanical drawing of the single shot Hagen action, which most of you would know. He had a Magnum action. My good friend Pat owns my Magnum Hagen. I sold it to him. I actually don't own a medium action, which might surprise you. I used to own Mark II two, but then, other collectors come along, and then Martin bought one of his rifles back from me. And he always had the best quality engraving. And, oh yeah, I won't go into the springs, but you can see how few parts there are and how perfect the design is. And there are some more beautifully decorated. This flat surface is just perfect for the kind of the expression of the engraver's art. And actually, I should mention Martin was a good engraver as well. He was superb checkerer, engraver, stock designer. Everything he did was just perfect. Many times we talked about the design of the lever, and we had all kinds of ideas about how to change it, but ended up leaving it the original way. And if you ever have a chance to buy one of these Hartmann of Ice or Hagen, many were built in kind of a gray market situation because I never followed exactly what the arrangement was between Martin and Hartmann of Ice, but you'll find some of Hagen's rifles aren't really marked very well because maybe he was supposed to build only for Hartmann of Ice, but I don't know any of the details. It was just something like that. Anyway, Hartmann of Ice, great company. What else can I tell you about, more? Oh, this is the buttstock of the falling block double. And I can tell you that although Martin worked with, all the burl, Turkish walnut, just sensational figure, he preferred less complex figure. He thought a gun stock should be fancy to a point. And then past the point, I remember he told me that the figure that some of the clients wanted looked like pipes, like the wood on, smoking pipes. I don't know anything about pipes, but that's what he said, and I know what he means. It's kind of, the figure is just so complex on some gun stocks, and you can see the, perfection checkering. I probably have something else here. I have so much stuff. Anyway, everything was perfect that he did. There was nothing lacking, and he used the services of people from the American Custom Gunmakers Guild and the Engravers Guild. And as I said, he went to the shows. And I think generally speaking, people like Martin. He was, you could see, very intense and, much like any or many of the masters of literature or music, his primary interest was in building guns. I remember being in his shop one day, and we would speak once in a while in the shop, but sparingly, because I could see he was focused on his work. And a fellow dropped by, just a local guy, who said, he brought coffee. He was kind of a nice guy, and he said, "Well, let's chit chat." And Martin, I don't want to say he exploded, but he said, "I don't want any chit chat. I don't want to talk to you about any of this stuff. I'm working," and more or less chased the guy out of the shop. I hope that's not a derogatory story. Then I have all the correspondence. I was reading it because I was interested in the Comblain falling block, which is really an interesting action. And so then we were tinkering, or Martin started coming up with this idea of a falling block that would work solely on the function of the trigger. I can go through that another time, I suppose. And we call that the thumb trigger. And I even sent a deposit to Bill, but he was always so busy. So here are more of his drawings of different actions, different ideas. Some of them had my notes on, but I whited them out. Oh, here's that thumb trigger. You can see it's a different concept. Essentially, it's a falling block that is operated by triggers, and this design, but there were others that were single triggers. And I think this is the same as in the Hartmann of Ice. And probably I should get to the falling block double. And maybe I should, I don't know, publish all this stuff one day. I have pages and pages. I noticed the stuff that he sent me from Germany. Sometimes he was over there visiting his parents, is fading. You remember that, this stuff, it was faxed, and anyway, there's another design he came up with there. Here's the falling block double. You can see how crude my methods are. I taped together the drawing, or the parts of the drawing, but you get the idea of the falling block double, and altogether, this is the rifle that came into being. And you can see it's not too far off of what we cooked up with this drawing. So it's pretty good. I think the drawing may look better than the real gun, or vice versa. Marvelous release system on this scope. You know how claw mounts are? They usually have kind of two releases. This one, if you look in here, you can see a button. It's convenient, I think. You just push it in, and this slight force, which is good. The cool part is it's fitted so well. I can feel it lock, but you can't hear it lock or anything. So we'll take that off. That's a Collis. Martin believed in smaller scopes. This we agreed on. Actually, we agreed on most things. The scope's way too big, way too heavy now. I remember we were talking about why 20 power scopes, and the discussion was around whether the deer are getting smaller. I said, I don't think so. Anyway, here's the falling block double. So yeah, I mean, it's ugly right now, or it's maybe beautiful, but you can see that it has two of those spring barrels, and I'll cock it for you so you can see that's the same system, as essentially the same system. There are lots of things that are different in here because there are two barrels to deal with, two firing pins, two block stops, and all the rest. But essentially, it's a twinned system, and the action appears quite compact. That's what's showing. There's a nose to the action under the forend, but I didn't want to have nothing to hang on to, and then it really would look ugly. So that's how this falling block then simply close. There's some pressure involved here. And that looked a lot worse than it is just because of the way I was handling it. And one, and now you'll see the second. And again, with the stock on, it's much simpler, one and two. And there's no danger of damaging the firing pins because of the way it's designed. And a small quarter rib, which is beautiful. Separated barrels. He felt there's no need to trap the heat. I'll set it down so we can film better. No need to trap the heat. And barrel band on the front. And that worked out beautifully. And what I'll do is, if I can do it easily, I have to tell you about Dakota though, because the Dakota 10 is a very nice falling block as well. I think there we are. So that is falling block serial number 1, and you can see the serial number on the bottom of the action there. And you're probably wondering what the caliber is. It's 7x57R, and again, perfection stock making and checkering, R being rimmed. And another little trick, because he was shooting this, as you can imagine, and quite a bit, but 7x57R ammo was difficult to find, so if you look carefully at the chambers, it may be hard to film. Better if I just explain. There are small little claws in the extractor, and they are sufficient to hold a 7x57 regular rimless round, so that they're extracted. And yeah, that was smart, and I kind of suggested in a drawing that it could be done. It takes meticulous machining. You know, it's tight in there. I don't know why I'm having so much trouble closing this action. I think it's because I had the stock off and something is infringing on the action, because I kept the butt plate on and the stock bolt is sticking through. So I'll just leave it like that rather than break anything. And now the Dakota 10, that's here. So this was another fantastic story. Dakota Arms, started by Don Allen. I spoke with him many times, and he essentially made a variant of the Hagen action, and he was worried that there'd be some kind of, you know, infringement. But Martin was easygoing, and he said, just go ahead. But Don Allen, I think he had been a pilot for American Airlines or United, one of the big airlines, and loved guns. Fantastic character. He made this for me. It's that unforgettable rifle because it's in 45 ACP, and he thought I'd lost my mind ordering it in 45 ACP. But it's a wonderful rig, and if you just like shooting and, you know, not small bullets, this was something else. Anyhow, you can notice, or maybe you can't, but this action has more of an English look to it. It's less Germanic, but because of the architecture of the parts, Don had to go to what Martin would never do, and that's an offset firing pin. So this is the firing pin for the Dakota. And the reason I come back to this is we started with a discussion of the Heron and how it had to be at an angle. I don't know where the drawing went. And because either you go at an angle or you go straight, like Martin's here, you can see it's inline. That's the ideal. We always discuss the firing pin strike, and it should be kind of like a snake bite. And then here's the angle. So angle, not so good. Offset, an interesting solution. There are a lot of guns like that. I did notice in the instructions, it says don't dry fire the Dakota 10. Things could go wrong. And I noticed that I got a spare firing pin, so maybe that tells you something. What else can I show you? It's endless. He was a great hunter. Pictures of him with ground bears and so on are common, and I went bear hunting with him. He was, I would say, fearless or maybe even reckless, and somehow we ended up crawling into this bear den, which I didn't think was a great idea, but it was empty, so we were lucky. He was a constant explorer. I'm not sure if you're aware of where he lived, Cranbrook, British Columbia, but he ranged far and wide, especially years ago. And this is a wild, wild province. There are still places where nobody's been, even to this day. In fact, a few years ago, they found a body on a ledge way up north somewhere. You can check this story out, and they thought, some kind of bad thing had happened, but the authorities came and it was a hunter from like 10,000 years ago or 15,000 years ago, because as it turns out, the mountains in BC were the only things sticking out of the ice, and people lived here. Anyway, he explored far and wide, and one of the great discoveries was his cave. Martin loved this cave. It was an adit. If you know the mining business, so that's like an exploratory kind of shaft or tunnel. I remember he phoned me and he said, I need something to block out the cold. I need a canvas, and gave me the dimensions. He also kept some equipment in there. It's probably there still. And so I found a canvas in Vancouver, bought the canvas and shipped it up to him, and it served well. It's hard to find, proper durable canvas, but anyway, that happened too. But there were so many stories. I love the way he went hunting. I was sort of similar. A lot of people have, GPS, phone, backpack, equipment, all kinds of stuff. And I would go hunting with him, and we would have some food and some stuff. He was a fan of discomfort, and I guess maybe it's a Germanic thing. I don't know. I'm probably not correct, but I have a bit of a German background, and yeah, not necessarily seeking comfort. Just if you're uncomfortable, he felt it builds character. I always thought that too, or so I was taught. Anyway, that's covered a lot of ground, and definitely phenomenal gunmaker. If you can find a Hagen, I think you won't be unhappy owning it. I should have kept all of them, but the saying is you can't keep them all. So I'm happy with what I have. And that falling block number 1, be careful lifting it up. That's a beautiful piece to own. Oh, there are some other things. I'll close with this. He sent me a note. One of his last notes, actually, was this one. He said, Dear Mike, I came across these parts. And for his last attempt, so these are outside of the action because, frankly, I couldn't figure out how to install them. And then the next time I talked to him, he couldn't remember either. But the thing was that there was an ejector in there, but it would throw out the loaded round and the fired round. It wasn't selective. It would just kick everything out. And I actually have a diagram of how to do it. I just didn't get around to putting it together, and probably won't, because I like the extractor. That's more than sufficient. All right, well, I hope you find that interesting. I hope some of you have handled or own a Hagen action. It really is, I'm not overstating it, a brilliant designer, as good, except that he didn't make dozens of designs, but what he came up with was exceptional. And the Dakota 10, even though it has that offset firing pin, it's a Hagen, and I think that there are copies. I think the Searcy copy of the Hagen is around. I could be wrong. People tell me things, and I don't always check into them, but it's a great action, and built in every caliber from, there was a 22, actually, long rifle. He didn't like the firing pin setup. And he worked on all kinds of guns, and Rugers as well. I actually have one made by him, Ruger number 3. Anyhow, I hope you found that interesting. And yeah, we go on. All right, take care.